I have a number of unusual brass instruments on display in my home. Most of them are small enough to be hung from hooks on the walls, and some are large ones that can rest on their bells propped up against the walls. But some tend towards the tall and narrow shape and are unstable, falling over easily. I thought to support them on some sort of stand similar to trombone stands, but there were problems with that approach. One thing is that most of the instruments in question are too large for trombone stands. Another thing is that trombone-type stands hold the instrument high off the floor to accommodate the slide, but for my large instruments there were no slides and I desired the instrument's bells to be closer to the floor. Yet another thing is that while very nice by themselves, trombone-type stands are not very furniture-like, and I wanted something that looked a bit nicer. I decided to make my own stands using readily available wood, and not try for actual furniture-grade quality, but rather something functional yet reasonably attractive. I made a total of 5 such stands, 4 of which are shown in this photo. My plan is scalable for any larger brass instrument, but would probably be too difficult to make for instruments with narrower bells such as French horns, trumpets, and cornets. It works well with bell-up tubas and euphoniums, ophicleide, sax horns, etc. The configuration is that of a Triskelion, with 3 identical sections of plywood joined in the center with 120 degrees between them, just like a peace sign or a Mercedes logo. One nice thing about this shape is that the 3 sections can just as well be designed and laid out as if there were to be just 2 of them or even 4 of them. This sketch shows my layout for one instrument, with 2 of the sections shown 180 degrees apart. There is the wide base, the recessed area for the platform that supports the bell, the raised area that fits inside the bell near the flare, and finally the higher knob area that is widened to fit the inner diameter of the instrument a bit further away from the bell. Having the narrower section below the top knob avoids having to carefully shape the stand to fit the flared bell contours. The only critical dimensions are the diameters of the knob and the raised area below it. Here are my plans for another stand of the same type. For the most part, I found that an overall height from the floor to the top of the knob is about 18 inches, unless the instrument is fairly short, for example a euphonium. The diameter of the base is in the area of 18 or 20 inches. The height of the platform that supports the bell is about 4 inches from the floor. The height of the raised wide area that fits inside the bell is about 8 inches above the floor. The height of the knob is about 18 inches. The bell platform has a diameter of 2 inches more than the diameter of the bell, and it is recessed ½ inch into the 3 plywood sections. The foot at the end of each section's leg is about 3/8 inches high. The plywood is regular ½ inch thickness, and I was able to make my 5 stands from a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of plywood having 2 good sides, cut in half at the lumber yard, as no piece has dimensions greater than will fit on a 4 by 4-foot section of wood. Besides the ½ inch plywood, the other essential supplies are a few wire brad type nails of at least 1 1/4 inch length, wood glue, sandpaper, and varnish, plus of course a saw that can make curved cuts in plywood up to 1½ inches thick. Finally, I recommend investing in a beam compass like the one shown. These are invaluable for drawing large circles, as is necessary when laying out the shapes for the bell platforms. I started out by marking cut lines on the plywood, demarking 3 rectangles that each have dimensions matching the width and height of the Triskelion sections. Because the Triskelion sections are only wide at one end, there is a lot of space between them for most of their length. This allowed me to lay out the circle for the bell platform between 2 of them as shown here. I next rough cut out the bell platform circle perimeter and also cut the 3 sections from the plywood sheet. Because the circle was cut out from between 2 of the sections, they don't all have the same shape at this point, but they all have room on them for their sections. Here are the 3 section pieces after being separated from the plywood sheet. Note that while one is still rectangular, the other 2 are missing triangular sections where the circle section was removed first. I stacked the 3 sections with the rectangular one on the bottom, and with the long straight edge that they all share carefully aligned. The section having the layout for the shape of the Triskelion section was on top of the stack. Then I nailed 3 wire brads through the sections to join them together temporarily. I used a bandsaw to cut out the stack according to the shape drawn on the top section. If you don't have a bandsaw, a saber saw, scroll saw, jigsaw, or coping saw could be used. Here is the stack of sections after being cut out. Note that I left a small bump on the bottom of the long edge of each section. This is needed to support the Triskelion sections during gluing, but it will be cut off later on. Here is the bell platform after being cut out to its proper circular shape. I have a spindle sander, so I used it for the stack and the circle, but you could hand sand it or use whatever sanding tool you might have. After the shaping of the parts was complete, I pried the 3 Triskelion sections apart. I also laid out and cut the Triskelion pattern with a 1/2 inch width to each spline on the bell platform. The distance from the center of the platform to the end of each spline is determined by the width of the raised section on the Triskelion sections. I also used a piece of scrap plywood to make a gluing alignment jig for the knob area of the Triskelion, and its cutout dimensions are based upon the width of that knob area. The long edges of the Triskelion sections must be cut with 120-degree bevels. To make this cut easier, I used a scrap length of wood as a bevel fence for my bandsaw. You could rig up something similar for use with a saber saw, or circular saw, or table saw. The bevel fence has a section cut out to allow the blade to be at a 60-degree angle without cutting into the fence. The cutout would need to be larger if a circular blade is used on your saw. Here is the bevel fence in action. The long edge of each Triskelion section is passed along the bevel fence past the blade. After the first pass, the edge will have a point, but still needs to be cut from the other side. I flipped the sections over and cut along the long edges again, with the point riding against the bevel fence. Note that it is critical to make sure that the bevel fence is positioned correctly relative to the blade, or else the edge's point will not be centered properly. I used a piece of scrap wood to try the bevel cuts, adjusting the bevel fence until the cuts came out perfectly, and only then did I cut the Triskelion sections. Here is a fuzzy photo looking along the beveled edge of a Triskelion section. Here is how the 3 Triskelion sections come together after beveling. And I think you get the general idea. The next step was to test fit the bell platform with the 3 Triskelion sections. If any trimming is to be done, now is the time to find out and make the adjustments. I also test fit the knob alignment jig at the top of the assembly. With all parts proven to fit, I applied wood glue where the parts fit together and added the knob alignment jig. Note that the bell platform works as an alignment jig for the lower part of the assembly. Make sure to wipe any excess glue before it runs. After the glue dried, I stuck the assembly into the bell of the instrument to check for fit. You can see in this view that the bump on the bottom center is still there, but still needs to be removed. You can also see that the width of the raised section, or maybe it's the width of the knob, is too great, and so the stand will not fit all the way into the instrument. I used a sanding drum on a Dremel tool to remove a little bit of the width at a time until the stand fit into the horn with a bit more than 1/8 inch of wiggle. If you don't have a sanding drum, you can file the excess wood away. The aim is to have the instrument fit easily over the stand without too much wiggle. If the stand is too wide where it contacts the instrument, the pressure might possibly deform the brass if you push down on the instrument with too much force. This is the primary reason for having the bell platform. The weight of the instrument rests on the platform, and the instrument cannot go further down on the stand, so the shape of the Triskelion stand's raised sections will not press against the brass with too much force, and dents will not happen. Once the instrument fits over the stand properly, we can think about padding the wood where it will contact visible parts of the brass. Before getting into that, note in this photo that one leg of the stand is off the floor. This is because that bump on the bottom center is resting on the uneven floor and acting like a fourth leg. This is a good time to trim that bump away. I used a pull saw to do the trimming and finished it off with a sanding drum on my Dremel tool. With the bump removed, the 3 legs of the stand will always set in a stable manner on the floor, even an uneven floor. At this point, I used some wood filler in the seams along the center of the stand where the 3 sections come together, and where the bell platform meets the legs, and where the Triskelion sections pass through the bell platform, and where the wire brads pass through the Triskelion sections. I applied a coat of satin finish polyurethane varnish to all wood surfaces. After it dried, I sanded lightly and applied a second coat. I bought a pack of 3/4-inch round felt pads of the type usually put under furniture legs to prevent scratching of floors. I trimmed them to be 1/2 inch wide and affixed them to the bottoms of the ends of each section's legs. I also bought some nice red felt and cut it into 1/2 inch wide strips. The length of the strips was adjusted to allow them to start at the bell platform and extend up past the point where the brass contacts the raised section of the stand. I used rubber contact cement to affix the red felt strips to the edges of the Triskelion sections. It really only needs to be where the brass contacts the wide area of the wood here, because without the felt the wood might leave slight scratches on the brass finish, and this area is not far inside the bell of the instrument, so the blemishes might show. I only extended the felt down to the bell platform for 2 reasons. First, because I think it looks better, and second, because making the strip longer gives the rubber cement more area to grip, and the felt is less likely to be dislodged. Here are some views of the completed stands. I hope that my stand design is useful to you.